G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle. I had a choice of two different videos I could do today. One is about recasting and prices and stuff like that. I didn't really want to do that one though, so instead I've chosen to go with this, which I think is a lot more constructive, and that's 9 golden rules for list construction in the Age of Darkness. Now, this isn't Zone Mortalis, this is regular Age of Darkness, regular Horus Heresy games. The thing is, a lot of people ask me different videos, messages, that sort of thing, to look at their lists, or to talk about things I would include in lists. And because of that, I thought I'd lay down a few simple rules that people should try and follow if they're going to be creating lists for the Horus Heresy. So, with that in mind, here's the 9 golden rules. Rule number 1 is cover the basics. 1 HQ and 2 troops. Don't start spending big on your HQs until you're well over 1,000 points, because under 1,000 points, every single point you can spare counts, and you will find that you will very rarely earn your points back on those HQs below 1,000. This is the perfect environment for consuls and centurions especially. Tactical marines are also the best fit for troops in these low point legions. They're cheap, reliable, and leave you the maximum amount of points to spend on other units. Mechanicum. For them, you want to use things like Thralls and Thalax. Now, the choice of which suits you personally depends on if your Magos is going in a unit and supporting it. And again, you're going to go cheap on the Magos, you're not going to go for the expensive ones in this points level. For Militia, it's all about Grenadiers. For the Solar Auxilia Las Rifle sections, they're definitely the go-to. You don't want to be going for Velataris and that sort of thing in the low points games, because great as they are, they don't bring the numbers for the points. Militia players, I know you're going to be tempted to run large units of infantry conscripts, however, just one unit with flamers or Volkites is all it will take to ruin your horde mode game plan. Golden rule number 2 is unit killers. So every army needs something that can deal with tanks and infantry. You need to start with something like a Legion Heavy Support Squad or a Contemptor Dreadnought, or, as you can comfortably fit both in 1,000 points, both. These units are comfortably able to dual role on the battlefield. Both can be squeezed into 1,000 point lists. The same thought process is true for other factions, ideally using the units the opponent may struggle with, such as Castellax, Domitar, Vulturax, Charonite Ogrins, that sort of thing. You want to be looking for tough units that can take enemy fire, preferably be virtually immune to the enemy fire, and which can also deal with any enemy unit they may face. So for Dreadnoughts, you might be looking at a Power Fist and a Chain Fist combination, with either Graviton guns or heavy flamers for its weapons. Or in the case of Blood Angels, maybe assault cannons, if you've got the points. And the reason for this is that if you can walk up to the enemy and punch them in the face, the game is won, essentially, and your troops can just hold on to their objectives. If you're relying on your tactical marines or the equivalent in another force like Las Rifle sections to do all the killing, that's going to be a problem because they're not really built for that. Yeah, they'll cause wounds, but they're generally terrible at outright killing the opposing unit. Golden rule number 3. As points go up, you need more scoring units. As you go over 1,000 points, try to add at least 1 scoring unit per 500 points as a rough estimate. Sometimes, more will be required. As an example, a unit such as a Plasma Gun Tactical Support Squad. They may be scoring, but they're not going to survive the game. In all likelihood, that's due to the fact they're both a threat for their killing power and because they score. And killing them removes 2 problems at once for the enemy player. Therefore, you can't count on them scoring. So if you're going to add a unit like that, you need to add something else that can score for when they die. Rule number 4. Counter all threats. As the points go up, more flyers, vehicles, and heavy infantry such as Terminators will appear. You cannot just continue to take more of the same units you previously used. Instead, you need to diversify your force. You need to take anti-tank, anti-infantry at first, yes. Then you need to add anti-fire, as well as units which excel in dual roles, such as Siege Wrecker or Chainfist Dreadnoughts, which can kill infantry and armour. If you rely on any one unit to perform a task and it dies, you are screwed. Golden rule number 5. Never underestimate flyers. When they aren't there, you don't miss them. But when they are there and you didn't plan for it, you are going to suffer, as they fly about virtually unmolested, harassing you at every turn. The Spartan you have delivering your Primarch Death Star? Imagine 4 Kraken penetrators dropping into the side of it, leaving you stranded 18 inches out from the entire enemy gun line. And of course you're also 300 points down for the cost of a couple of missiles. It's not cool, right? I suggest to avoid vehicles with only anti-air, such as Whirlwinds. I also suggest avoiding fixed platforms like the Tarantula, as their low ballistic skill and mediocre weapons are of limited value. The best solutions are mobile units, such as the Sicaran Arcus, which is overpowered, the Derrideo Dreadnought, other flyers, Voltarax, things like that. Rule number 6. Don't blow your load on Lords of War. So, you hit 2,000 points and you're thinking to yourself, great, I can spend 500 points on a Super Heavy now. It is rarely a good idea for 2 reasons. Either it's something overpowered, like a Typhon siege tank, and you're going to make your opponent miserable, or it's weak like a Cerberus and you're throwing away points, unless it blows up in the middle of the enemy army. Basically, save the Lords of War until you get into the really big games, the 2,500, 3,000, the 4,000 point games. At 2,000 points where you can just start taking them, I don't think it's really fun to do so. Rule number 7. Don't rely on your Death Star. I preach multiple methods for defeating Death Stars. They are single, expensive units, and disabling them can win you games outright. However, I often like to ignore the Death Star, choosing to focus on more on the rest on the army, as usually that's where most of the scoring and mobile units are kept. If you can take down the rest of the army, you have control of the battlefield, and it doesn't matter if the enemy Death Star's in your deployment zone, you've basically got the rest of the table you can move around in, capture objectives. They can only be in one place at once, and especially if you've killed their transport, they're not getting you anytime soon. Golden rule number 8. Vary your units. Themes are great, I strongly recommend them, yes. That said, keeping to a theme does not mean being weak. You need to use a variety of units and exploit it on the battlefield. You need to have fast moving troops, slow, tough troops, things like that. The better the mix, the less likely that one fantastic unit on the other side of the table will hard counter your main assets. For example, a Land Raider Achilles is a very hard counter to conscript spam. You won't hurt it, and each turn it's going to kill about 30 infantry between the Volkites and the Thud Gun. So if you've invested entirely into your conscripts and you come across that, you're in for a very, very rough game. And lastly, golden rule number 9. Don't take a Rite of War for just one unit. Last and most importantly, this point is huge. If you're taking the Rite for a single unit, you're doing it wrong. Your list worked just fine, and then you wanted one more thing and you're willing to take all the negative penalties that come with it? You see, that sounds like a bad trade-off to me. If you can, try and avoid taking a Rite of War unless you're specifically playing to its strengths. The same sort of logic applies if you're playing something like Mechanica. Don't go Legio Cybernetica because you only have a unit of Castellax for your troops choice because that's all you bought from Forge World. Because you're not going to be getting the most out of that one unit of Castellax as a compulsory troops. Instead, you want to be taking Legio Cybernetica if you have lots of Castellax and Domitar and Thanatar and Thorax, Arlatax, whatever fucking automata you've got. Don't go around trying to build your lists around one unit, it is gonna end badly for you. So, if we can apply some of these logically, a token list at 1,000 points, for example, for Space Marines would be a Centurion, 2 Tactical Marine Squads, a Contemptor Dreadnought with 1 Chain Fist, 1 Power Fist, and his weapons he'll be armed with inside those hands are either graviton guns or heavy flamers. One damages vehicles, the other kills a lot of infantry, and the choice is yours based on what you think you need most. If you think you're going to come up against other dreadnoughts, graviton guns will help you to take a few hull points off them before the fist fight begins, and it will probably give you the edge. In a protracted fist fight. On the other hand, if you think you're going to be coming up more militia, more infantry-heavy armies, especially if you're salamanders, heavy flamers all the way, because you're going to do a lot of damage with them. And a heavy support squad with missiles or las cannons. Missiles, I think, are the poor man's choice, but they're cheaper, and the frag ability can come in handy. That said, las cannons are expensive, and they don't have any area of effect. So again, what do you think is more important in your meta? I can tell you this. Anything that has a flare shield that comes up, or anything with armor 13, 14, you're going to have a hard time killing it with missiles. Las cannons are where it's at. Now, if you want to expand this list at 1500 points, you keep the Centurion, you keep the tactical squads, you keep the Contemptor, you keep the heavy support squad. But expand with a Legion Terminator squad, so another scoring unit, and a tough unit too, something you're not afraid to move into the enemy's deployment zone, something that can also take a bit of a hit, a bit of a punch, and give back. And a Derrideo Dreadnought, because it's giving you more light anti-tank, and it's also giving you an anti-air platform now. And it's adding another threat to the battlefield at range, which can only be dealt with at range, and it forces your opponents to try and deal with it in some way, either diverting troops to outflank to try and kill it, or firing at it with weapons that they now can't use on something else. And that's the way you got to build your lists, guys. Logically, if you're going up again to 2000 points from here, this is the point where you start going, hey, I can start taking multiple consuls or a Praetor. Praetor is fantastic at 2000 points. 2 consuls is fine at 1500 points, but you lose a bit of that killing power on the rest of the army. Remember, a HQ, you only want to use a HQ that's tooled up with all the cool war gear that costs 200 points if he's going to earn that 200 points back. And in the low points games, when your lone HQ's in a tactical squad with just 10 Space Marines around him, those 10 Space Marines are basically 10 extra wounds on him, they're going to die, he's going to die. There's no two ways about it, unless you send him on his own across the battlefield, in which case, he's just going to die because he's on his own. So very rarely do they earn their points back. Instead, units like the Master of Signal work great below 1000 points, but since he's a non-compulsory HQ choice, you still have to bring a Centurion or a Delegatus or a Chaplain or something else to fill in the compulsory slot. It makes life genuinely hard for you. And with Mechanicum, well, their HQs are incredibly expensive. The Militia and the Solar Auxilia, their HQs are brittle, and to make them strong, you need to invest a lot of points into them. And points drains in an army with low leadership, low toughness, poor armor saves, not ideal. The Solar Auxilia, they get away with it a little bit better. But AP4 weapons, say World Eater Chain Axes for example, yeah, they're absolutely terrifying to them. So think it through when you build your lists, of course, but those are my 9 golden rules. To cover off on them once more, make sure you take that HQ and your 2 troops before you start spending on anything else. That's golden rule number 1. Don't piss away your money on that HQ. Rule number 2 is the next thing you invest in is anti-tank and anti-infantry. Rule number 3, as the points go up, add more scoring units, at least 1 every 500 points. Rule number 4, counter all threats. Don't just plan on there never being flyers, so you don't want to spend the points put in anti-flyer, because that one game there is a flyer, you're fucked. Rule number 6, don't blow your load on Lords of War. Just because you can fit one in, doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea. Rule number 7, don't rely on your Death Star. Because either everything's going to shoot it and it's all going to die and it's struggling to get there, or you've got very few units left in your army. Death Stars are something that only work well in 30k at like 3000 points, when you can build a Primarch with a decent supporting unit with him, and you can also still have another army outside of that that's functional instead of just a couple of token tactical squads. Golden Rule 8 was vary your units. Don't just go, oh, I'm running an infantry army and just have all tactical marines. You're going to lose your games. And rule number 9. Don't just take Rights of War or upgrade your force to a specific provenance or something like that for a single unit. You're setting yourself up for failure. I'm Mac with the Other Circle. I hope you all found this helpful in some way. I might get to you with that video about recasting and pricing soon, but it's more of an Australian-centric video, and it's a bit negative, so don't know if I really want to do it or not, or if it'll just end up on the back burner long term. But anyway, thank you all for watching. See you all next time.